You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
Hello and welcome to Force 13 Live. Tonight we're going to be talking about what is a substantiated tropical cyclone here, Tauktae, which is heading towards India. This is a significant event that is currently ongoing. It's a rather serious one as well. We're expecting this to make landfall in India as a Category 4 cyclone. So this is a very dangerous situation that is currently unfolding. With me tonight, I have Adler, Alfiria, DJ, Xavier, and Mike. How are all of you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Could be better.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're looking at a very serious situation right now that's currently unfolding for India. And, I mean, you know, we're already seeing significant rainfall occurring for places like Gao, like that airport over there. And it looks like we're going to be seeing some areas here, especially on the northwestern side of India, that could be seeing some really serious wind and rainfall potential over the next few days. Big thing right now that we know, there are a few things that we know about the storm. First of all, the storm is currently a Category 2. We have it as a Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale, winds of 100 miles per hour and a pressure of 966 millibars. That is its current intensity. So this thing is already quite strong, and if it made landfall as a Category 2, where it's expected to go there in India, it would be causing very, very bad impacts, as it is already. It's expected to strengthen substantially. We are expecting a 150 mile per hour peak of this thing as it is off the coast of India before making a landfall with winds of 140 miles per hour as it moves ashore and moves inland, making it a solid Category 4 system. So that is also something to consider. We do have the tag of this being a life-threatening situation, as this is a Stage 6 on the CDPS scale, with wind speeds being major, rainfall potential being major as well, the storm size being significant, and the overall threat to land being major. So again, a Stage 6 on the CDPS, high-end Stage 6, nearly heading into Stage 7. We're probably going to have to make that upgrade later tonight, unfortunately, as it looks like the wind field could be a little larger than we were initially anticipating. We don't know that for sure just yet, but we're fairly certain that we're going to need to make that upgrade here soon. But as of now, Stage 6, wouldn't be shocked if it goes up to Stage 7. So to the team, what are your overall thoughts with this storm, and for those that are in the path, what do they need to know?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a very, unfortunately, dangerous one, especially with the path of the storm, not something that you typically see in the North Indian Ocean, let alone the Arabian Sea. But what we're seeing right now is rapid intensification, this, at least by our analysis at the very least. And this is what happens when you have an increase of 30 knots, which is about 35 miles an hour, over a 24-hour period. Of course, last night we were talking about a high-end tropical storm, and now we're looking at a Category 2, and it continues to strengthen as we head into the morning and afternoon hours local time there. So definitely going to be something that a large amount of people have to watch out for, especially considering the fact we're looking at least 60 million people in the threat of this, and that is a very large population, especially with Karachi. That is one of the cities in Pakistan that is under this.
Yeah, so I mean, this is some very serious stuff, and we're expecting hazards such as strong winds, heavy rainfall, very high storm surge, and a rather large wind field. Those are all things that could be possibility with this storm. And unfortunately, the conditions for this are nearly perfect over the next day or two for it to continue its intensification phase. The biggest thing that's been limiting it as of late is the land interaction with India. I think that if the Indian part of the continent in the country, the southern side of things here wasn't there, I don't think that we'd be having this problem, and we'd be having a much stronger storm heading north here. So you know, I mean, it is good that we do have some limiting factors on this, but pretty soon as it moves offshore, there's not going to be much limiting this thing from going all the way in terms of intensity, and unfortunately the ceiling is quite high, which means that our intensity forecast with that 150 mile per hour peak could get beaten. We'll have to see. To the team, what would you say the ceiling for the storm is, and if you were in the path of this storm, what kind of wind speeds would you be preparing for?
Well, the is obviously really high for this storm. You know, when you're in very favorable conditions, you can really go as far as upper echelon of Category 5, but I don't see that as a likely fact. I don't see that as likely gonna happen. More likely, the ceiling for this, I believe, would be 165 to 175 miles per hour, which is no matter if it reaches Cat 5 or not, it's going to be devastating. And in reality, you should be preparing for 140 to 160 mile per hour winds. But this storm could definitely beat that, considering where it's at in conditions. It can definitely overachieve.
I would definitely say that's the case. Go on, Xavier.
Yeah, and there's been really two distinct model scenarios that the models have been trying to depict as of the last few days, and really there's not a good scenario in either one. I mean, it takes the eastern track, then you're really talking about a very significant rainfall threat for portions of western India, and then you have that landfall still as a major cyclone there at Category 3, and that even still would bring significant wind damage and flooding along areas of Sindh, especially, in Gujarat, possibly. And then, of course, if it takes that western track, and then you're talking about Karachi, a city of over 14 million people being in that. And, of course, that means it has less time to interact with land, which, of course, in turn increases its max potential in terms of how far it will go with intensity. So it's definitely a concerning situation either way. And as Salad or DJ mentioned, previously, this is not something to take lightly. It does not matter whether this is a Category 4 or Category 5. This isn't really something we should be taking into account here. This is something you really need to be preparing for because those winds are going to be extremely significant and very destructive, especially towards shelters and any sort of building that you're pretty much in, especially with those type of winds. So you really need to be deciding what you are planning to do, whether it's going to be going into a storm shelter, or if there is easy access to those, especially with the COVID crisis that has been going on in India, that's been limiting some of that. And then, of course, you have to think about whether it's the better option to evacuate, because that could also be a situation that you might have to do. So you really need to consider what's your action plan for this, because doing nothing is not going to be a very good option at all for you.
No, this is a kind of situation where action does need to be taken, and the kind of action that should be taken, especially if you're in the path of this storm. And I'll pull the cone back up here just so we have a good idea. And I think that a better representation of this as well could be the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's cone, which doesn't just have the area where the landfall in the center could be, but it also has the areas that could get impacted with tropical storm force winds and generally the maximum area possible impact. So if you're anywhere within the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's outer edge here, I would be stocking up on supplies. And by that I mean I'd be getting enough food and water, and we're not talking perishables, we're talking canned food and gallons of water, enough of that to last every person 14 days. So generally that's 1 gallon of water per person per day for 14 days. And then, 1 can of food per person per day for 14 days at a minimum, the preference being about 3 cans of food of some sort per person per day for 14 days. So that would be optimal. But we don't exactly know where this is going to go. That would be preparations in terms of supplies. If you can move inland from the coast, I would do that as well. Drive substantially inland. In particular, I'd say try to drive outside of this cone area. That would be good to do. If there's any way that you can transport yourself out of there, do so. If not, board up your home if you can. Do things like that, and make sure that you have a sturdy, substantial shelter. If you are inland, if you're a bit inland, I'd say once you're beyond 50 miles inland, try to get a sturdy basement shelter. Know where a sturdy shelter with an interior room is so you can withstand those winds. And if you are along the coast, storm surge and flooding are going to be huge concerns for you. So you're going to need to have a place where you can get to higher ground, like a roof or something like that, on as sturdy a building as possible. A building that is most likely to be able to withstand the water and withstand the winds. Those are going to be your best chances of survival. So in terms of preparation, the best thing to do, stock up on food and water, evacuate the area. If you can't do that, what you're going to want to do is find either substantial shelter for winds or substantial shelter for flooding, and preferably both, especially if you're along the coast. And then again, stocking up on that food and water. So that's 1 gallon of water per person per day for 14 days. So for 2 weeks, that's 14 gallons of water for each person in your household. And then preferably 3 cans of food per person per day. So that'd be preferably 42 cans of food per person in each household. So it's a lot of stuff, but that's the kind of preparations that need to be made at this point.
And yeah, you really can't take the storm for granted, especially because with previous storms elsewhere, you can see like there's sometimes usually a good scenario and then there's a bad scenario, and it's usually wait and see which scenario plays out. We don't have that this time. We're looking at a bad scenario either way. So whether you're just outside the cone, I mean, impacts can still occur outside of that cone there. So you really need to be watching this storm seriously, monitoring, I should say, very effective at this point, because if you're not monitoring this, then it's really going to be risky towards you, your family, your lives. I mean, if you have family out there, if you are watching from other countries and you have family in India or Pakistan, you really need to be letting them know of this storm, because, of course, this is going to be a very significant storm, possibly one that has not been seen in decades if it goes in at the rate it is. So, I mean, we typically don't see storms this strong heading into Pakistan and India.
Yeah.
And with Amphan last year, and that was what the Indian Meteorological Department was saying this could intensify at the rate of. And then this was in eastern India. I mean, this was in the Bay of Bengal. This is the Arabian Sea, so this is a completely different side of India that are seeing impacts. And this is also Pakistan that's also going to be seeing impacts. They don't tend to get impacts much. I think there's only been 4 cyclones officially that have made landfall in that country.
Yeah, so it's definitely...
A thing,
go on.
touching on what Xavier said about Amphan's rate of intensification, Amphan intensified from a Category 1 to a Category 4 cyclone on the Saffir-Simpson scale in 6 hours. That is rapid intensification. That is... It's crazy. Those type of intensifications don't usually happen very often. So that's the rate that we are thinking from Tauktae could potentially happen.
Yes, and since we're already at a higher intensity when this real explosion could happen, that means that the ceiling for that explosive phase is a bit higher. Now, something that I would like to point out that's really important is that regardless of the intensity of the storm, whether it gets to Category 4 or 5, which I think all of us are pretty certain it's going to at least get to 4, the important thing is that you're going to be dealing with very, very strong winds. And you're going to be dealing with winds of in excess of 130 miles per hour. We're forecasting a 140 mile per hour landfall. And for those that are in India, because I know kilometers per hour is the main unit over there, that's 210 kilometers per hour to 225 kilometers per hour. That's the main thing. So winds in excess of 210 kilometers per hour is likely. We're currently forecasting 225 kilometers per hour. And, the ceiling for this, we could be seeing winds in excess of 250 kilometers per hour with this storm in a worst-case scenario. So it should be noted that that's really of concern. The biggest concerns, though, storm surge by far for the coast, wind speeds as you head inland, and in between, and then really as you head inland, it's going to be flooding once those wind speeds begin to die down. But anyone that's within the cone of this storm, regardless of whether you're in the Category 4 point or the tropical storm point, preparations need to be made because power outages are going to be happening. That's pretty much a certainty. Homes are going to be damaged or destroyed. We're going to have mudslides. We're going to have flooding. We're going to have devastating storm surge damage, wind damage, things like that. So it's pretty certain at this point that if you're within this cone, you have a fair chance of getting some of those conditions, but somewhere within that cone is going to get, unfortunately, I think that the best way to describe it is that somewhere within the cone will be getting obliterated at some point as the storm does head inland, and that's something that I don't say lightly at all, but I think that that is something that's warranted in this case. This is a very dangerous storm that's going to be heading towards land, so I really don't think that there's much of another way to put it.
Yeah, especially with.
I'm looking at this on radar now because it's close enough to the coast of where there's radar imagery for this. There is a large majority of its heavy rain is off the coast right now, but there's still a lot of rain going up against Goa and the surrounding regions. So already, right now, this is ongoing. We have an ongoing scenario where flooding could be a big threat, and there's already been issues in the states that have already been affected by this from yesterday and today.
Oh yeah, prior to this intensification, Kerala had been thrashed by heavy rain, and it was becoming a near flooding disaster there. And this is going to only continue as the storm continues up the coast in regions as it impacts. And flooding will be in problems in the regions that it makes landfall in. Gujarat will probably get some significant flooding from this. This is a pretty devastating situation.
It is, unfortunately, and we can also say pretty safely as the wind velocities are going off the scale on the radar here. Once you get above 48, that's 100 miles an hour about. So we're well into Category 2 status, it looks like, at this point with this storm. It could potentially be stronger than our current estimate. Regardless, it's a very dangerous situation. Now, we've looked at, the general threats and what we're expecting. I do want to look at model data a little bit, just because I feel like this can help break down where the storm's headed and what we're really expecting out of it. So this is the H-Worth. This is a hurricane research model. This is a really good model. It's one of the best in the business, specifically made for tropical cyclones all around the world. It has the H there for hurricane because it's primarily built for the Atlantic where recon data is, but it does a good job handling storms that don't have recon data as well. So this storm here, it has it at about 968 millibars. We have it at about 966, so it's doing a fairly good job, and it's well within our margin of error. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at. And as we take a look at the movement of this storm, we're expecting it to move away from the coast. This model expects the same thing. Now, the important thing to note here, don't look at the pressure so much. It's going to drop, it's going to rise and fall, and that does indicate the strength of the storm to some degree. But look at the bigger picture. This is strengthening as it heads close to land. We have a strong storm nearing land, making landfall, and the biggest thing to notice is just how large those tropical storm force winds are in the green, and those pinks are your hurricane or cyclone force winds or above. And you can see that that's a rather substantiated area of coastline. Now, this exact area, don't look at the exact area because this could vary some, and I'll actually look at past runs just so you can see how much these runs vary in terms of location at the same time. So we don't really have much consistency on the exact location, but we can get pretty close, and that's why the cones here. The cones are really a good indicator of the places where the center could pass, but anywhere along here could have a storm of about the strength you just saw heading into them with about similar, if not larger, wind fields. And that's really important to note with this. Another solution, and then we can actually watch this head inland, and then we'll take a look at another one. But you can see it weaken as it heads inland, but you can see Pakistan there getting impacts as well. Tropical storm force winds extending quite a bit inland before this weakens. But the bigger picture from this model is we're going to watch this thing strengthen, head into India, impact Pakistan as it moves up north. But, it's clear we're going to have impacts remaining along the coast here, and we're going to have impacts heading into India and Pakistan over the next few days. Tuesday in particular, that's going to be the big day. It's going to be when the storm arrives. Now, I do also want to take a look at the rainfall threat. So there are two ways that we can look at this. The GFS, I don't want you to look at exact locations. I don't even really want you to look at what it says for locations. Wherever the storm tracks, these are the rainfall totals that you can expect. So over 200 millimeters of rain, over 400 millimeters of rain actually falling right along the coast. And as you head inland, you can see widespread over 50 millimeters there. So that is the expectation in terms of the maximum amount that you're going to see in the specific area where it tracks. Now, if we're talking about the amount of rain that you should prepare for, there is a even better way of looking at this, and I can actually pull that up right now. This is the ensembles. So this takes the model that we just looked at, and it takes an average of a bunch of similar models together. So you can see what the most likely amount of rain for your specific area is going to be. Now you can see the totals are nowhere near as high, and that's because it's taking an overall average. So know that you could have substantially higher totals. But these totals here that you're seeing inland are what you should expect at the very least. So this gives you a much better idea. This is one where you can look at specific locations and say, okay, I'm going to get at least this much rain. So that's what these are really good for. And there it is. There's that above the 50 millimeter mark. And we exceed the 100 millimeter mark some as we do head inland. But again, you can see much of India there, well over 15 millimeters. So a big rainfall threat there. And we can also take a look at the H-Wharf, which we just looked at a bit ago for winds, and we can also see the rain from that and the expectation there as we head inland a bit. And this actually is showing Pakistan getting some pretty significant rain from this too. We're expecting 8 to 16 inches of rain, so let's say 12 inches of rain to millimeters. That's about 300 millimeters of rain. So the maximum for this, 300 to 400 millimeters of rain along the coast and inland a bit, that's pretty significant, and that's something that needs to be taken very seriously as well. So you have big winds. We're expecting winds over 140 miles per hour with this potentially, and we're also looking at a pretty big threat for rain. So to the team, with both of these, what are your thoughts on it? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Where do you think the most rain's going to fall? What are we looking at right now?
Well, obviously, the strongest winds are probably going to be on the northeastern quadrant, like most storms that we see in the northern hemisphere. The rainfall, I've been, of course, really concerned about what's going to happen. Really with that western side of it, and of course parts of western India, while this remains a very rain-producing storm. But really, it doesn't matter how much rain it affects, because if you get 2 inches of rain, that can easily cause flooding that can start lifting cars, of course, at least floating cars. So really, if it's 2 inches, or which is about 100 millimeters or something like that.
Yeah.
But regardless, it's like you shouldn't be really looking at the rainfall. You should just be really getting prepared for flooding, no matter what track it takes, because of course there's still a decent amount of uncertainty with where this storm will be going. So you should be preparing for a large amount of rainfall. You may not end up getting it, but it's better to be prepared than being sorry that you didn't prepare.
Yes.
And even if rainfall is not the main concern, well, even if there's not a lot of rainfall, storm surge flooding is still going to be an issue from this storm, and places that are going to get hit by the strongest winds will have a lot of storm surge flooding. So, storm surge and flooding kill 90% of people during tropical cyclones. So, you should be preparing significantly for storm surge flooding and flooding in general.
Yeah, you know what I mean, and flooding is the thing that does by far the most damage and deaths, so that's the big thing there. But again, the winds, nothing to scoff at either. Now let's take a look at the GFS from the wind perspective, and this is something that's interesting. It's actually taken a step back. It shows a weaker storm than it did. Still a robust Category 3 or 4 making landfall there, but not quite as strong as before. This could be good news. And I guess the next question to the team, do we think this is a fluke, or do we think this could be some really good news in terms of the storm's strength?
It's impossible to know. If it doesn't, obviously the shorter of the time it has over water will mean a weaker storm, but that does not really take away from the fact that it's going to still be devastating no matter if it's a Cat 3, Cat 4, or Cat 5, it's still going to bring significant storm surge and wind damage, no matter how strong it gets at this point.
Yeah, and I think that we can both agree on that. Something else that I would like to get to is just for the viewers to know, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please feel free to ping us just at Force13 in the chat, and we'll be more than glad to answer your questions. We do want to get to those. We do want to get you the information that you need in order to make sure that you're making as informed of decisions as you can in regards to this storm. And DJ, you just sent a satellite image here. I'm pulling it up right now. That is not a good look. I don't like that at all. You can see the ice starting to come out. You can see the flares of storms. This looks like a pretty quickly strengthening system, and I don't think that anyone likes the look of that.
Yeah, it seems that the eye that we've seen on radar for some time is beginning to clear out on satellite imagery, which is obviously a sign that the storm is going to be able to rapidly deepen, because obviously, you know, the factors that go into strengthening. I'm not necessarily the best at that, but it's typically a sign that when an eye comes out, it'll be able to strengthen much quicker, and yeah, this is not a good sign at all.
No, and it is perhaps a sign of what could be coming, and we can actually see here on the infrared a bit here that has been playing on the loop for a while, that eye is starting to come out there as well. And we're really starting to see this storm wrap itself up, and this could be the beginning of it really getting its act together and intensifying quickly, unfortunately. Again, we do have it as a Category 2, winds of 100 miles per hour, 966 millibars, and we are expecting it to strengthen and make landfall at 140 miles per hour when it does head into India. Those are winds over 225 kilometers per hour there. And, unfortunately, I think it could be stronger than 100 right now. We don't know. Our cyclone analyst team is keeping a very close eye on this, so if we get any big updates, they'll be the first to let us know, and then we'll let you know. But our social media handles after this stream will also be on it, so as soon as we have new information, you'll be knowing that. So that's something that I thought was important to mention. And with that being said, I guess for any of our new viewers that have just joined us, to the team, would anyone like to give a summary of what we've been talking about and what the current state of the storm is right now?
Yeah, I can do that. So basically what we're looking at is a strengthening cyclonic storm Tauktae, or tropical cyclone Tauktae, depending where region you are in. We're looking at 100 miles an hour right now. Could be stronger based on what we've been seeing, but as of right now we have it 100. It has a pressure of 966 millibars, and it is presently moving at north-northwest at 9 miles an hour, which means it has pretty much finished its recurvature, as it was moving east-northeast, then it shifted northeast, and now it's pretty much making that turn northwestward as anticipated. It is we are looking at a very dangerous landfall. As of right now, we are depicting 140 mile an hour landfall. Very, very dangerous storm we have set up on tap, and of course that eye is now coming out, and it could be making a landfall anywhere between the Gujarat area into parts of southeastern Pakistan. So of course those there should definitely be keeping an eye out. Western India, of course, with the flooding situation that's been going on there, and of course areas inland, of course, as obviously once the storm plows inland, it's not just going to go away instantly, of course. It's just going to keep on going inland and bringing more rainfall. While the winds will be weaker, flooding will still be a threat, so definitely a very large population that will be affected. Over 60 million people.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a few. And so, for those that are in the path, I'm going to pull up our cone, and then I'll show the Joint Typhoon Warning Centers in just a minute. If you are within the path of this storm, you need to be making preparations. So the way that I'd suggest preparing for this is, if you can, evacuate the area. If you're within the path of this storm, especially if you're within the Category 4, Category 1, or even that first tropical storm point, if you're in any of those areas, I would suggest evacuating the area. going outside of where the storm could potentially impact, and that would need to happen sooner rather than later. If you cannot evacuate, if you are along the coast or in a flood-prone area inland, you need to find out where a sturdy shelter is that can withstand the strongest winds possible and has as high of an elevation as possible. So that way you can get up on the roof and you can keep yourself safe during storm surges, during flooding, during things like that, because unfortunately most tragedies do take place from flooding. The other thing is, if you are not in a flood-prone area and you are inland, then you can start looking into interior rooms, lowest level of the building, just trying to withstand the wind of this thing. And while that's happening, other things in terms of preparation that you should be doing is getting a gallon of water for every person in your household for each day you anticipate to be gone. I would suggest a 2-week supply for each person, so 14 gallons of water for each person. And then you can also get food, and 3 cans of food a day is normally pretty good for each person, so that would be 42 cans of food for every person in your household to ensure that you get through this, and that is really that's really important. So those are the big preparations. That's what I would be doing. Those are the suggestions from things that I've read. Of course, the IMD and official sources also have information on evacuation orders, things like that, who needs to be evacuating, and what preparations to make. So please look at them as well. They have the best advice that you can get on this, but that right there is at least a place to start if you can't find other information on how to prepare yourself for this storm. All right, it's time to start taking questions here. I think I've been rambling enough. So the first things first, could this make a Category 5 landfall?
Most definitely.
Yeah,
It's possible.
I believe it's 100% possible for it to make one.
Is it right now? Do we think it will? No, but as time goes on, and if it overachieves and gets stronger earlier, there is definitely the possibility that it could reach Category 5.
Yes.
I generally don't want. It's like I generally don't want to say whether it will be a Category 5 right now, based on the rarity of Category 5s we really see in the North Indian Ocean. I mean, of course, the potential is there, but of course, right now, I think it's really a bit too early to say. Well, I mean, the exact landfall this is going to be yet. So I really wouldn't give an answer to that question for now. What I would say is, whether it's a Category 3, 4, or 5, you should be treating it very, very, what's the word for it? Very efficiently. You need to be taking action immediately if you haven't already. You need to be making sure that whatever you're going to be doing, it's going to be something that you stick with, because as of right now, you have 2 scenarios. You either need to be figuring out what kind of shelter you're going to be being inside if you're going to be hunkering down inside the storm, or you need to figure out where you're going in terms of evacuation, because, of course, that is probably going to be the best scenario right now, especially with how strong of a landfall we could be seeing with this storm.
And with this, the real mindset here is that, like Xavier said, regardless of what intensity this thing will make landfall at, it's still going to be a major disaster that I think many of us are going to remember for a while. And with that being said, the main thing that I'm here is that, in regards to preparing for this, you need to hope for the best but prepare for the worst.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's absolutely a good mentality to have here. Moving on to the next question. How high in miles per hour will the storm get? We're currently forecasting 150 miles per hour for the peak intensity of this, although obviously, as we just discussed, that could get higher. I don't think that putting an absolute maximum value on it is a fantastic idea, given the uncertainty. But I think that we all could certainly agree it has the potential to go above 150 in a worst-case scenario.
And as I said earlier, my personal limit at this point is 175 miles per hour, but it could definitely get above that Obviously, it's more than likely rapidly intensifying as we speak right now. Obviously, it has an ion microwave that's beginning to clear out on satellite, and the maximum winds could definitely reach very high into the Saffir-Simpson scale, which is not very good.
All right, and then the next question is, where did we get the Indian radar? So the way that you can get Indian radar is it's from the Indian Meteorological Department website. The best way to find it, the easiest way to find it, is literally just going to be searching on Google India radar. It's going to be the third or fourth result as you scroll down, and that is the Indian Meteorological Department's website for their radar data. So that's where we can get that. Next thing. How is the storm structurally doing aside from the eye trying to pop out? Is it more symmetrical or is it still lopsided like earlier? Well, I guess I'll throw this one to the team. What do you guys think about the storm structure?
Well, of course, this thing is still improving. I mean, 2 days ago we were looking at, or let alone a day ago, we were looking at a storm that was really dealing with shear, which kept all the tropical storm force in terms of its wind field all to the southern quadrants, and that really did have a massive wind field, 200 plus miles nautical miles to the south is where those tropical storm force winds were extending 40 miles an hour plus, and then to the north we were only looking at about, say, 30 to 40. Now that has definitely gone up, and it's gotten more balanced and organized in terms of its storm structure, which means that this thing is definitely in healthy conditions and it's been improving. And as long as this is going to be in those healthy conditions, I see no reason why this won't continue to improve.
And we can even see the improvement on current satellite, and we can actually see it in this loop. We started with billowing convection moving to the south here, the northern side pretty bare, and now we're starting to see those minus 70s really start wrapping around, those minus 80s start wrapping around the storm. So I think symmetry is improving. Structure is improving. You can see that on infrared. You can see that on radar. All indications show that the structure of the storm is improving rapidly, unfortunately, which only spells trouble there for the areas that it's headed towards. All right, our next question. What is the current Dvorak estimate for this storm? I believe that right now, I want to double check this. I want to make sure that I get this right. But I believe we're at either a T4.5 or 5.0. I just want to double check real quick which one is most fitting. Yeah, no, we're at a... I believe we are at a T4.5, yeah. For this right now on Dvorak, which doesn't account for surface observations, things like that. So I believe right now we're at a T4.5. Could be wrong. I'm not the greatest with Dvorak, and I haven't made a fix recently, so I'm looking at other data. But right now it looks like a 4.5, and then which translates to about 90 miles per hour. Or about 80 knots, and we're at 85 knots with the current estimate. And how much storm surge can be expected? We really don't know how high it could get. It could get very high. To the team, I think it would be a pretty reasonable assumption to say that over 10 feet of storm surge is a possibility here.
I say it depends on how much onshore push is there when it reaches land.
I think that is a reasonable suggestion there. And it looks like we do have some stuff here. We do have some IMD warnings here. These are district-based warnings in India right now. As for the current alerts in India, and you can see there those tier lists. You can see there near where the storm is ultimately going to be making landfall, some watches in place. And you can see here where the storm has impacted due to flooding, things like that. We have many warnings, alerts, watches in place all across India as a result of this. And we also have current precipitation totals, and this is also some more useful information. Where we can see the totals here of over 35, over 64 millimeters in some cases, and even some spots of 115 as of May 15th. And then you can see here the normal amounts. So we are well above normal, and precipitation anomalies are very, very high right now along the coast where the storm has been. Most of new satellite image, which shows a much better appearing eye on the storm, really starting to come out. The symmetry really getting together. DJ, I know you've been sending these in. This is looking pretty gnarly right now.
Yeah, the eye is continuing to clear as expected. The eye on microwave is also looking really good. And, this thing is more likely strengthening very quickly, which is obviously not a very good sign.
Yes, and speaking of, we have a question asking if this does show any signs of rapid intensification. I think we can pretty safely say at this point that it is rapidly intensifying. And there's our latest radar wow. That's our latest radar image. That is very bad news. That latest radar image that just came in. That is very clear. That is a surefire sign of rapid intensification. This storm is strengthening very, very quickly, and I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. So that's definitely bad news. Luckily, that eye wall remaining offshore, but this thing's probably strengthening quickly, and I think it's pretty safe to say that this is above 100 miles an hour. And again, we're going to have more estimates coming out throughout the night tonight. We aren't going to have a new estimate this hour, but you will be seeing on our Twitter and on our Facebook in particular new updates as new estimates come out. We'll have one coming out about 3 hours from now. We're going to have our next big estimate. We're probably going to be making an upgrade to a Category 3 at this rate, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And our next question here. Are we tempted to make the upgrade to a major cyclone right now? That's our next question.
Personally, I still think that's a little bit of ahead of the storm. It's not quite a major yet. I still think it has a little bit of work to do, but sooner, maybe after 06Z, probably at 12Z, will more than likely be a major cyclone by then. But it could definitely, if it continues to rapidly improve on microwave and radar and satellite, it definitely could reach major in the next 6 hours, which is not a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a very concerning thing, to say the very least. And again, that radar image, we're just keeping it up there, a very robust eye wall that's formed here. That is a very concerning thing to see. Our next question is, what impacts are currently being felt by the storm in western India? The main thing is tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall. And again, we showed those rainfall totals just a little bit ago. Some areas getting over 100 millimeters of rain from this. So that is quite concerning, to say the very least. And I know we had a question about storm surge earlier. I do want to pull up this graphic that we just got. This graphic shows the storm surge potential as the storm moves towards land. And you can see there as we get towards those 2 to 3 meter storm surges. That's what we're looking at. 2 to 3 meters, it looks like. That's pretty concerning. That's a lot of storm surge. That is 6 to 12 feet to some degree, 6 to 9 feet, and it could be higher if the storm does get more intense. So we'll see just how intense this does manage to get, but this is looking like the bottom of things. At least to me, this is looking like about the floor in terms of storm surge, unfortunately.
And the IMD has definitely been very low on the forecast, so it more than likely will be a lot higher at landfall storm surge wise, which is obviously, and 2 to 3 feet is nothing to scoff at. not 2 to 3 feet, 2 to 3 meters is nothing to scoff at. So obviously, you should prepare for the worst at this point.
Yes. Someone asking, what is the peak intensity that we're expecting right now? We currently expect 150 miles per hour, although we do want to note it could go higher. So 150 is right now what we're anticipating, but as the team and I have discussed tonight, definitely could go higher than that.
And Category 4 winds are devastating winds. So the thing that it could go higher and be much more impactful is scary, and that is what we are currently facing. So, yeah, it's not looking good.
Yeah, and now we have people asking, where should you go in India if you are considering evacuating? So, the way that I would do this right now is the Indian Meteorological Department is going to be issuing evacuation orders if needed, or at least an official part of the Indian government will issue evacuation orders. They'll tell you where you need to go and how long you need to be there. So when I make that suggestion, my best suggestion would be, and again, this isn't an official source, go to official sources to get better information. This is more a fail-safe. If for some reason you can't get to the official source, if for whatever reason you can't get to a source of information for where to evacuate and you feel the need to, what I would say is that just from a geographical map, anywhere outside of this area is pretty safe. Very, very safe from tropical storm force winds, definitely safe from the very worst impacts. And then outside of this cone, a fair bit outside of this cone, I would also say, is pretty safe for evacuation. So looking on a map, the closest place outside of this cone would be best. But again, I implore you to look at official information for this, if possible. This is just a fail-safe in the event that you can't find that information.
Yeah.
Next question. Let's see here. How is it that we're expecting 2 to 4 meters of surge? The expectations here, these are given by the Indian Meteorological Department. That was the graphic that was just shown. But regardless of that, the way that this is calculated, storm surge forecasting is a very new science, so it's very uncertain, and most of these forecasts are low. But basically what it does is it says, okay, we're going to take the current tide and we're going to try and say, okay, if we funnel in water, how much is that going to funnel due to the wind speeds into a certain area and cause damage? So basically, given computer models and given past storms, we can get a fair idea of how this is going. This is by the Indian Meteorological Department. This is not our forecast. We don't do much in terms of storm surge forecasting yet, although I hope that does change here soon. But Force 13 right now, we don't make storm surge forecasts often. Right now, this is from the official source, but they are giving us that 2 to 4 meter figure. So that's what we're looking at there. All right, we have 10 minutes left before we do go. So again, if you have any more questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, then please do ask them. We'd be more than glad to answer. Someone asking, what are the major cities closest to the path of Turkey's worst impacts, or Tauktae's, my bad, worst impacts, specifically major cities, and those the most threatened by storm surge. So, pardon my pronunciations here, I'm going to butcher these, but Banagar, my bad, they're a city that needs to be watching. The very worst for storm surge is going to be places like Gandhiham, which I believe is where Gandhi was raised. We have Joida, Jamnagar. Those areas in particular are the places most vulnerable. Those three, Kendala, those areas are most vulnerable to storm surge. In terms of winds, the biggest city that's going to be in that is Rakat. We're going to have Jungda, Pordbar, Dwarka. Those areas are going to be well within those worst areas. So those are areas, basically your worst storm surge is going to be right about here on the map. Your worst winds are going to be right about here, and there is, unfortunately, an area of overlap here for both of those. So that is the current expectation, and those are some cities there. I hope that was helpful. Someone else asking, how long do you think it will take for the eye to fully clear?
It depends on how quickly it clears the subsidence at the surface.
Yeah, that's the thing with eyes. Usually, in terms of the formation of the eye and the eyeball replacement cycles, we really don't get to have the knowledge to know like when it's going to take. It can take up to 6 hours. It can take up to a full day. It really usually depends on the structure, how it develops, and how it evolves. So that's unfortunately something that we can't exactly nail down. But given the way that the eye is coming out, I'm saying that at the very absolute latest, we will probably have a full-fledged eye by tomorrow night.
Very likely.
I would say that is a fair statement. We do have another question. What influence will the close and parallel track to the coast have in inhibiting strengthening? I would say that it's the reason this isn't a major cyclone right now. I think that's pretty safe to say. It's definitely inhibiting the storm's strengthening. The structure itself, like the eye wall itself we've shown on radar, is offshore. It's more because of outflow, which is kind of like the ventilation for the storm is restricted. It can't really vent its heat from the center all that well out there, which makes it very difficult to make things more symmetrical, because in order to have a really good formed eye, you need to have enough ventilation to vent out all of the heat that it's taking from the surface and really lofting up into the air like that. So it's inhibiting strengthening because it's preventing it from having enough outflow to sustain a really big eye at this point. So that is really what it's doing. It's inhibiting the storm from having its eye come out. And with that being said, we are on the final minutes of the stream, so I would like to go over a bit of a summary of what we've gone over and what exactly it is that people can expect. So first things first, the storm is rapidly strengthening right now. As of the beginning of the stream, we had it with winds of 100 miles per hour and a pressure of 966 millibars. It could be stronger, but we don't have any information on that from our cyclone analyst team just yet. And again, we will have updates on that stuff on our Facebook and our Twitter. So you'll be able to find on Force 13 on Facebook and Twitter when we update our estimates. And I could see this being a Category 3 when our next estimate comes out in about 3 hours' time. The next thing is, I do just want to go over the general impacts of this. So first things first, this is our cone of uncertainty. We're expecting this to peak with winds of 150 miles per hour in about 1.5 days, for in about 2 days' time, slamming into India there as a Category 4 with winds of 140 miles per hour. And again, it could be stronger than this, winds of 140 miles per hour currently in place with this as the most likely intensity of landfall, according to us. This is a CDPS Stage 6, bordering on 7. Will likely receive that upgrade soon, with major wind speed potential, rainfall potential, and a major overall threat to land. And the storm size is also quite significant. So again, that's devastating damage that could take place from this. We've talked about winds quite a bit. Let's talk about rainfall. Some rainfall is looking rather significant. This is the GFS overall rainfall. So you can see here, this is the maximum rainfall totals there, exceeding 250, 300 millimeters, and right along the coast over 400 millimeters. And as we take a look at the ensemble, we can actually get a pretty good idea of rainfall there as well. And you can see here rather clearly widespread areas for 50 millimeters being possible. So preparations for strong winds, heavy rain, and large storm surge are needed, and you can see here that storm surge as well. So now we've gone over that. I do want to go over the overall preparations that you can make. First things first, check your official sources for evacuation orders, things like that. In the event that you feel the need to evacuate and you have not been given an order, try to go outside of our cone and try to go outside of this cone in particular, the Joint Typhoon Warning Centers. That's where the tropical storm force winds, the maximum area of those could be. So if you're outside of that, you're pretty safe from the storm. So that would be my biggest suggestion in terms of evacuations if you really feel the need to do so. And then in the event of preparations, if you are along the coast, if you're in a storm surge or flooding prone area, you need to know of a sturdy shelter where you can get to higher ground, so that way you can save your life and protect yourself from the flooding, and hopefully it's sturdy enough to withstand those strong winds as well. If you just have winds to worry about, try to get to an interior room of the lowest level of a building in order to withstand those winds, or at least try to find a place where you can do that in the event that you would need to. So those are my suggestions. Other suggestions are have a 2-week supply of food and water for every person in your household. So that is 14 gallons of water for every person in your household, and 42 cans of food for every person in your household. That should get you through, so that we have a can for breakfast, lunch, and dinner each day, and you also have a gallon of water each day that you can go through in order to survive. So those are the big things in terms of my summary, in terms of preparations for the storm. So to the team, is there anything that you feel the need to add to that?
No, I think you've done an excellent job covering the situation. I mean, I think the many points have been made across with this one. This is a strengthening system. This should be watched very closely, depending or anywhere along the western India coast and southeastern Pakistan for sure. You need to have your action plan ready, whether you're going to be staying in a shelter board yourself, getting to the lowest level, and of course, making sure you're in a wind-resistant building, so that way if it does flood, you can move to higher ground, or whether you're going to be evacuating. I'm sure that there will be evacuation routes set up in the event that does occur. So it's definitely something that millions upon millions of people definitely need to watch as we head into the second half of the weekend and into the early part of the week, because this is definitely not going to care, obviously, as cyclones do not have feelings. So of course it's not going to care whether you are not ready or not. You need to have some kind of plan ready, so that way you can stay through this. Of course, as I always say, through any kind of significant situation, your property is replaceable, your life isn't. So of course you need to keep that in mind when you are determining that choice of action.
Absolutely. And we do have a couple of final questions that I would like to address. The first one being, are we going to be posting live streams on Tauktae every 12 hours up to landfall, and will we be having landfall coverage? I'm pretty sure we're probably going to be going in even closer intervals than that here soon. It might be 6-hourly tomorrow. We'll have to see, but we're definitely going to be doing landfall coverage. That is for sure. And then our final question before we do get going tonight, what is the estimated landfall time of Tauktae? Tuesday morning. Can't get more exact than that, but Tuesday morning, hunker down. That's when the landfall is probably going to take place. So I'd say anywhere from 4 to 8 in the morning, Indian time. Again, assuming our track, that's when landfall will occur. It could be a bit sooner, could be a bit later, depending on what happens. The farther east it goes, the sooner the landfall will occur. The farther west it goes, the later the landfall will occur. All right, with that, to the team, any final thoughts?
If you are in the path of the storm, stay safe. It's not going to be fun. And just hope for the best at this point.
Yep, and that is the case. And with that being said, thank you all so much for watching this stream. We do appreciate your viewership, and we do hope that we have been able to give you helpful and life-saving information as the storm does approach India. Again, this is a very serious situation, and we are doing everything that we can to make sure that you have the information that you need to be as safe as possible during this. That is our mission, that is our passion, and that's what we're always going to do. If you have any other questions for us, you can always tag us on Twitter, and we'll be happy to answer questions over there. We are also going to be posting additional updates, cones, cyclones, things like that, video updates on the main channel, and we also have an automated stream, a cyclone tracker. You can go over there to get the very latest information on this storm as well. So we have all kinds of different outlets, all kinds of different places that you can still go to get information. That, again, that's what's important to us, is that you're able to get that information. So again, thank you all so much for watching. We are honored that you've chosen us to be your source of information for this. And with that being said, have a nice rest of your evening.